Okay, Ellen, can you try that again, please? Okay, why don't you just go down to dynamic solution? Now we'll go back to the. Okay, very good. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our speakers for the sake of time and make sure that everybody who's on Zoom can hear. Can I just make sure that we have everybody on Zoom that can hear us? We might be able to get the audio for them later. Thank you, Amy, for all your hard work getting our speakers. Our speakers today are very near and dear to my heart. The self-determination program really is so important and so keenly needed for our families. We have tonight, we have Susan Requarth, Suzy, excuse me, and she is a NeuroNav program director for self-determination services. Suzy brings over 20 years of dedicated experience with the regional center system, as far as I'm concerned, they're saint, including leadership roles at both the San Diego and Westside regional center locations. Her career began as a direct support professional, and she has since served in diverse capacities, ranging from behavioral consultant to the service coordinator to regional center leadership at the state DOS level as former Ombuds person for the self-determination book. And then alongside her is Bridget Rainey, family onboarding manager with NeuroNav, brings a background in teaching mental health into her work at NeuroNav, where she's passionate about providing personalized and tailored care to meet each individual's set of unique needs. Her experience as an educator shaped her deep commitment to advocating for neurodiverse individuals and ensuring that they receive the support they need to thrive. And if we can, let's give them a round of applause for coming all this way. The floor is yours. We have our attention.
And is there any microphone situation or we're good?
You're good. Yeah.
It's
right there, but yeah.
And the people on Zoom can hear
Here,
you guys?
I have somebody monitoring, it says.
Awesome. All right, so I should
The
just,
sound is good.
I should mind my business.
The
Okay.
internet connection is a little spotty, that's why, you know. Like that.
Okay.
It's gonna talk to the city.
Well, hey, everybody, thanks for inviting Bridget and I to be here. Actually, a lot of you look very familiar and your names sound very familiar. As I was at San Diego Regional Center 2015 to 2022, and from about 2017 until I left in 2022, self-determination was a big part of my role there. But also I was the regional manager at our Carlsbad office, so a lot of your names sound familiar and yeah, it's a big place to be there too. So I'm just gonna pretend I know all of you. It's so good to see you. Okay, so we wanted to talk about today is self-determination, of course. I guess that's been my baby for a long time, but it is really gathering steam. Okay. For 6 hours. Okay, so SDP is really picking up steam. It started in 2018. I'm going to tell you what it is, but just like some historical context of how long it's been around. SDP or self-determination program, because it wouldn't actually exist if it didn't have an active to. So does that make sure? Yeah, but at all things. It started in 2018, and there was a 3-year kind of soft rollout. Some of you here were involved in, may be aware of that. And then it became open to everyone in 2021. So since 2021, the program has grown from about 670 people statewide, not very many, as we look at the entire state of California, to now it's just over 9,000 people are now part of the self-determination program. So it's grown pretty rapidly in the last, I guess, 5 years now.
She's saying 9 or 90.
9,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still small, right? That's about 2% of the EV community in California, but it's continuing to grow. Okay, so what I want to do today is for those of you that aren't familiar with SVP, So we meet about this, you can like tune out, watch a Netflix show for a minute if you want. I'm gonna just talk a little bit about what SDP is. And then, why it's, families or individuals choose to enroll in SDP. What are some of the things they do with it, what difference does it make in their life? And then leave time for some questions. My plan? Yes, all right. Okay, if you have a burning question, feel free to raise your hand or just interrupt me and take that personally. Otherwise, I'll make sure I have the time at the end. Go to the next slide. Okay, I think I already spoke to you guys the agenda, so let's keep going. All right, so here's the next one. What is self-determination? Okay, so this gives you a nice snapshot on the slide of essentially what self-determination is. I'm going to give you my elevator pitch for it, so to speak, which is basically the regional center spends a certain amount of money on, I think all of you are family members here, most of your parents spend a certain amount of money on your child services every year. That money might go to TLC, it might go to, well, breakfast is the school district, but it might go to a day program. But there's a certain amount of money at the end of the day, at the end of the year that has been spent. And initially, that came from a group of parents way back when saying, hey, we want all of our kids' money to go towards community-based resources, right? We don't want institutions anymore. We want all of the money that's available to support our kids to be available to support them in the community. That's how we got all of these vendors. And the reason we can even pay all of these vendors that most of you in this room, that's what your children are using, is because the federal government said it's going to be more expensive. And California said, no, it's going to be about the same price. And they're like, cool, you can spend your money in the community and not in an institution. So that's how like traditional services came to be. SDP is essentially the same thing. It's just the next step in that, where as always, it's the families that start the movement for it. They say, hey, how much money did you just spend on my kid? They didn't have $100,000 life. If I had control over that money, my kid would have an amazing life, right? And that's what I want to do. And so state of California said, hey, federal government, what do you think? And they said, it's going to cost us more money. And I said, no. Okay, cool. Create a program. Give families and people the right to have control over how they want to get spent. So that's like in a nutshell what SDP is that instead of the regional center just paying vendors a set rate that they would pay for everybody, and it's a finite list of resources. Now you as a parent or person receiving services can see how much money is available and decide themselves who it goes to, how much they pay for certain things, what that service looks like. So it's an elevated level of control for the business. Does that make sense? Yes. Yes. Yeah. I can do that.
One thing that these describe the array services that you can provide that just
Yeah, so let me go through the presentation because I think we'll touch on some of that as we go. And then if there's any lingering questions there that I didn't answer, we can come back to it. All right, let's go on. Okay, so as I was saying, SDP, you choose your own providers. Again, this is why a lot of parents and individuals choose to go through SDP is because they don't want to, for instance, just use the staff that the day program has. A lot of day program staff are amazing. I've been one myself. Love day programs and all the things they do. But for some families or for someone, it's like, they don't always have the right fit. I know who the right fit is. I want to choose the person myself and I want to hire them myself, right? So SDP allows people to do that, to hire people on. It also allows you to choose services that are maybe not available through what we call the traditional service system. So like an example of that would be somebody wants to start up their own micro enterprise. That's a hot topic word right now. People actually use their self-determination budgets to pay for some of the costs to get started in their own business, right? So that's an area where it's hard to do that through traditional because it's not part of the vendor service world, right? But in SDP, you don't have the vendor service world, so you have an open door to more things that fall between the cracks. All right, so therapies, that's a big question that we get often are what kinds of therapies would I be able to use through SDP? So I'm going to take a minute to talk about this because what I see happen a lot is people hear about SDP and they think the first thought is, oh, good, the school district, I don't like their OT, I don't like their PT, I don't like their speedy tour, it's not enough. I can do that through SDP. Most likely no, right? There are some very strict rules around SDP when it comes to therapies and funded services. So you do have more flexibility in terms of who provides the service. But one thing to keep in mind with self-determination is that that same rule, that same thing you hear probably from your service coordinator all the time, regional center is the payer of last resort, which sounds very like, but they are still the payer of last resort. So if you have something that's covered, whether it really is or it's a nice theory out there, if it's covered through another resource, the regional center is going to say, sorry, you can't do that. And that's so it seems like I'm coming in like as a Debbie Downer right now, but I do like to point this out at the beginning because I've just seen people get so excited, like, yes, finally, I don't have to use my health insurance behavior services provider. Yeah, those things still apply. So I don't want people to get stuck in that mindset and like, this is going to allow me to do a lot of different therapies. But it does open the door for things that may not be vendor with the regional center. A lot of people use SVP to do like aquatic therapy, horseback riding, like therapeutic horseback riding. Even like the culinary, that's a really good example. Culinary curriculums or nutrition curriculums, those types of things. You know, Tony, that's a very hard thing to get vendored in the regional center. But in SPP, you do that. You can use you can direct your money back. All right. Okay. So how do you think through whether or not self-determination might be right for you or your family member? Okay. So self-determination works for the majority of people that go into it. And there's a lot of people that it would probably work really well for that don't know about it or haven't tried it out. There are more people, from my experience, there are more people that do well in a program like SDP than don't do well. It's a little scary and overwhelming. I'm sure those of you involved can attest to that, right? Especially at the beginning, it's a very different way of accessing services, but it can have really amazing results in people's lives because of that extra control and being able to dictate what your day-to-day looks like. Okay, so for people who feel like they don't have enough control over their life, or as a parent, you don't have much control over what's going to happen in my child's day today. It's going to be whatever the service provider is doing that day. Again, a lot of times that's great, no problem. But if you're in that situation where you often have that thought in your head of, wish I had more control over what's happening in my child's day, that's like a little flag of like, maybe I should learn more about this. If there's things that your child needs that you've asked your regional center for 15 different ways, 100 different times, and they tell you we don't fund that. SDP might be a way to do it, right? So that's another little flag of, okay, let me learn more about this. If you struggle to get traditional services approved, sometimes there are things that, again, a regional center will say, hey, you know, you don't meet the criteria for supported living services. So, yeah, in the traditional service system, maybe your kid's living at home with you and they say, we don't do supported living at home. That's true, they don't. That's a fact. But they can say, like, here's what we would fund. Here's how much it would cost. And you can say, cool, I'm gonna spend that money on supportive living services, right? Because in SDP, that's not going to be, it's its own different service. So for something in the traditional service system that the regional center says they can't do for you, but it would really meet your need, SDP might be a good thing to learn about. If the vendors that are available aren't working for your child, you can go outside of the vendor community. Important though, you can also keep working with regional center vendors. Being an SDP doesn't mean you no longer have access to the regional center vendors. And in fact, most people that are in this program have kind of a hybrid service plan where they use some regional center vendors and then they, for some of their budget, they hire somebody to be their staff in the community, wherever it may be. Or they spend some money getting their micro enterprise set up. Also just there's some additional support you can get through SDP with just navigating the system in general, right? Like a service coordinator, also been one of those, worked with service coordinators many years of my life, near and dear to my heart. They have a lot to do. They have really high caseloads. And they're the go-to resource if you need help with navigating the system in general. And sometimes they just don't have the capacity for it. But you can't, there isn't another service like it, right? Because according to the state, they're already paying for this. They're paying your service coordinator to do it. In SDP, you can build more, you can direct some of the money in your budget for people just to help you navigate the system a little. All right. And this is just an example of this young guy named Alex, different Alex, not your Alex. But he, this is just kind of a snapshot of what SDP life can look like. So when someone says, you know what, I'm gonna try this, I think it can have a lot of advantages for me. Typically what happens, and this is what Alex did, he sat down with NeuroNav and he created a person-centered plan with them. We helped him do that. Many of you here heard of person-centered plan. People love using that term. Yeah, it's like if you wanted to get like anyone in the regional center to drop what they're doing and listening to, well, I want a person-centered plan. Oh, about this person is different. Yeah. So Alex sits down and goes through person-centered plan, which is really like an IPP on steroids in a way, right? Because it goes beyond, like, think about an IPP. It's essentially a contract between you and the regional center where they say, hey, you have these needs. Child has these needs. They have these goals. Here are the things we can pay for and connect to those needs and those goals. Let's all sign the paper and we go with our lives, right? Obviously, I'm like downplaying it. An IPP is a very important document and it includes a lot of really important and high quality information. Hopefully that's the intent of it, but it is very much directed towards regional center services specifically. It's a contract. A person-centered plan can go beyond that. It is generally way more robust. It talks about all of the things in life. It's not about this information is going to be used to determine how many IHSS hours I get, or how many respite hours, ILS hours. This is truly just, here's who I am, here's my life, here are the things I need, here are the things I want. And now let's take all of that information and figure out what makes sense from the regional center. What doesn't make sense from the regional center? What makes sense from somewhere else? So it's a more comprehensive way of just sitting down and looking at a whole person. So Alex does that. And then he decides, all right, cool. I'm going to do boss now. I'm going to hire my own staff. So once he knows what he wants out of life, he gets this vision in his head of, I spent a lot of time during my PCP talking about how I wanted to have the same person with me at home as the person who I go out and do fun stuff with. Right now, I can either have, a personal assistant or a respite worker with me at home, or I go to my day program. Why can't it be the same person? For Alex, He said, I want it to be the same person. It's weird that I can't just have the same person with me from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. or whatever it is. So he decided to hire some of his own staff, and he wrote their job descriptions. So he said, I want a staff that is okay driving, that is okay to be with me at home, also fine to take me to movies, bowling, at whatever. I don't know if it's he wants to do. But he essentially wrote the job description for the staff. And then he used some of the stuff he could already do through the traditional services. I think he was already doing an adaptive sports gym. I think the one that's around here. But he went ahead and kept doing that. He did some music. He joined a music program that was outside of the regional center system altogether, and was able to use budget to pay for that. He also was one that did some equine therapy, aquatic therapy. So when you look through this list, a lot of what he did are things you can do through the traditional service system, but some of it you can't. You can't it's really hard, as many of you know, I'm sure, to mesh together things that happen at home, things that happen not at home. And SPP makes that much easier to do. That's a really good reason that people really take advantage of things about who I want to try to be person. All right, next slide. All right, go to the next slide. Talked about person-centered plan. I always get excited myself. I get all excited. See, I am the regional center person. When you say person-centered plan, I'm like, all right, let's go. So I think I've kind of given a pretty good overview of the person-centered plan. But it really is, again, intended to be that holistic picture of somebody, so that it's not just about what can this person not do and what services do they need to be able to meet them. It includes the important stuff, right? So it's not that it's about sometimes people hear person-centered plan and they think, sugar-coating things, right? My child's with the regional center because they have some needs that they need met, right? It doesn't sugarcoat anything. In fact, it's more holistic in that, here's where my child struggles and where they need support. Also, here's the things they do really well. Here's the things that have worked really well for them past. And here's something that magic wand, they would love to be able to do something, right? Like you kind of bring in all of those things to get the full picture of what's really going to be effective and help someone with their best life. All right, thanks. Okay, so getting into self-determination is an epic saga. It can take a long time, and it can feel very overwhelming and stressful to families, which is why Bridget and I go and visit with groups, is to provide you with some information that you don't have to do all of it alone if you decide I want to try this. There are lots of different people involved in the process. So when you start with the process, you're going to do something called go to an orientation. In fact, let me take you to the next slide. I want to do a picture of what we have up here. I like this picture. So, okay, you've said to yourself, all right, FPP, let's go. The first thing you do is do an orientation. It's super boring. It's online. You have to do it. You check the box. Move on to step 2. Way more fun. Person-centered plan, which we already talked about. So you've done all of these things. I actually know the person who does the orientation training. She's lovely. I shouldn't say that. They're not that bad. They're really not that bad. They're just a little dry, which she is fully there. So you get your orientation done, sat down, you had your person-centered plan. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to go to your regional center and say, hi, guess what I'm doing? SVP. And they're going to say, now we got to do this whole process. No, they're going to say, that's amazing. There are so many cool things you can do with SVP. That's what we want regional centers to say. That's what I wanted my service coordinators to say. Because there are so many amazing things people can do. But what you'll do is you'll go to your regional center and say, we're doing this. We need to know how much money we're working with, right? Because if you're going to plan your life, you got to know what you're planning for. And that's why the person-centered plan comes first. is because to have that conversation with your planning team, your service coordinator, you need to know and be able to really clearly describe, here's the needs, here's the things that my child is trying to do. Let's have a conversation about how the services he or she has right now are working, how they're not working, and what it would look like monetarily for those services to be funded. So I'll give you an example. If you go into a regional center meeting, talk about STP, and you say, you know what, my child's been getting respite services, few social rec things. It's really hot right now, lots of social rec. Hopefully everyone's aware that that's back on the table. So they've got some respite, some social rec. But I think so you would say, hey, regional center, how much did you spend on that? They're gonna tell you. But that's probably a fairly lower end of something where they're like, all right, we spent $50,000 this last year. And then you're gonna have a conversation of, well, has anything changed in your child's life? Is anything going to change in your child's life? Were there things that weren't being met in the last year? And we want to talk about were there other services that we could have accessed? Because all of those things are going to be what goes into that budget. Because remember, the budget is the amount of money that the state of California said, no, it's not going to be any more expensive. That's the whole point. So when you're sitting down to do the budget, the regional center's job is to say, here's how much money we would spend if your child was not an SEP. We would spend 40 hours of respite, a quarter of, 10 hours of ILS money. That's what they're essentially doing, is building out the traditional service plan and how much that costs. So when you go into that meeting, it's really important to be ready to articulate if things aren't happening that, needs aren't being met that you want to be met, or if there are things that are going to change that normally you would just go to your regional center service coordinator and say, hey, my kid graduated. Can you give me that list of big programs now? Now you need to actually have that boiled down to a dollar amount because you're planning for what that looks like. Maybe you use a big program and that's fine, you can do that for SCP. But it may be that you're looking to hire more staff, right? So you have to be able to articulate with your regional center what the next year looks like and what's working and not working right now. And all of those steps that when you start with the budget, they'll all go into creating an updated ITP. So now we're like drilling down into that contract essentially between regional centers. So after you get that amount of money, which I generally call another one of the boring parts, because it's all about traditional services and dollars and then you get to the fun part where you have that pot of money and you say, all right, now how do I want to spend it? The IPP is important because that's really the common thread. Anything the regional center agrees is a need or a goal that they would put funding in place for, they're going to expect to see you spend your money to meet those same needs and achieve those same goals. It could look very different, but ultimately, how you spend your money does need to still match up with what the regional center and you have put into the IPP. So it's still an important part of the process. I'm sorry, not getting away from the IPP, it's still there. All right, so then you'll create your spending plan using a new set of ways to describe services. They're a little bit broader and more flexible. And then you'll wrap all of that up at your regional center with a finalized IPP. And then you get started with SDP. Up until the moment you enroll in SDP, you still have access to all the services as you're receiving them now. So there's never a gap in service. So like if you go through the orientation, that doesn't mean all of a sudden you don't have traditional services anymore because you're SDP. You are in the traditional service system until the day you enter. Okay. We'll start off and now maybe go one before the last one. That last yeah. I wanted you to know what the process looked like before we talk about who's involved in it. So you know what we're talking about. So SCP, you're gonna have some very familiar people still in the picture, your regional center. So regional center service coordinator, they're still involved. They're a pretty important part of the process. Your circle of support, which that's you guys, that's other people that you have in your life, staff, or friends, all those things. And then there's two new roles that are going to be part of SDP. One of them is what's called the financial management service. So if any of you started hearing about like money and the dollar amounts, we're thinking, well, does that go into my bank account? Is this going to mess up like its benefits? Is this going to have any tax implications? No, none of the money ever touches anyone's hands that's receiving the services. It all goes to a financial management service. I'm sure many of you here are familiar with that because you have those in the traditional system too for other purposes. So they're going to be, there are requirements of self-donation. Once you decide how you're spending your money, tell that to the FMS, and they say, okay, cool, and they manage actually getting the money to it as we use these services. The fourth one up in the left-hand corner, independent facilitator. That's me and Bridget. That's what we do. This is not you do not have to have an independent facilitator and self-determination. It's something that people can choose to have. Most people do choose to have them at this point, I think, because the program is still evolving a lot over time. And I think coming into it, it can, like I said before, it can feel really overwhelming. But not everybody. Some people say, you know what, I got this, I'm gonna do it myself. And other people like me are like TurboTax, and I'm just going to HR block, TurboTax is over my head, right? So it's just kind of up to like, do you have the time, the capacity, and mainly those things. Do you have the time and capacity to manage all the moving parts of a program that's different from what you're used to? And does give you more control and choice, which also means more responsibility, because the regional center is not doing all the wraparound providers. So that's what we do. Independent facilitators are available to support like the process I just walked us through. Yes, I want to do SDP, do all the things that need to happen to get there. We can also have an independent facilitator after you've enrolled in SDP to continue helping just managing the facility. And again, that's a choice. At neither time are you required to, but typically people will choose to have that support if it feels overwhelming, right? And they want to just have someone else doing things like making sure providers get paid. We'll get very get paid. So it's sometimes, if you feel like lose track of a lot, that people will use an independent facilitator to help with that. Or if you don't know where you're going to find providers, that's something that independent facilitators will help with, finding providers. Okay. All right, now we can go to thinking. So this is just kind of a continuation of that for people that use independent facilitators after they've enrolled in SDP. These are some of the things that we assist with. Typically, once you get cruising in SDP, it's kind of, it can turn into a little bit of a rinse and repeat, depending on how complicated things are, like how many providers you want to use. So you might find yourself posting here and there in between the year, but every year we've got to go through the spending plan and the budget process again, because the regional center has to redo that, which means you have to redo the spending plan. So that's probably one of the heavier lifts in SDP is that you got this annual renewal. Again, sometimes you get it locked in and it moves along really well. If you have a lot of changes happening in your life, job has a lot of changes happening, then it can be a little bit more of a lift. And that's something that they choose to have that facilitator help them with. Because it typically takes about 3 to 4 months to really and that doesn't mean it's like 3 to 4 months full-time job. But it takes a lot of it takes a lot of proactiveness with your regional center, and then just a lot of constant follow-up. Like I said earlier, first coordinator not the wrong place. So sometimes it can almost feel like, we're just nagging on your behalf. But hey, that's what we do best, right? To nag. That's right. All right, we'll go to the next one. Challenges that I think I'll try to speak through these. I think I talked about these just as reasons why people sometimes get scared off by it. And mainly what I want you guys to take away is that SDP sounds really cool, but you feel really overwhelmed by it, you can't get help with it. And yeah, this is just some things that you can count on, right? To have that help. You've got somebody you can pick up the phone and call. But again, I don't give my facilitators caseload of 90 because I don't have to. Regional centers have to. They don't have a choice. We have a little bit more agency, right? So like we want to be able to use that to help you guys. So we want to be able to help you guys help your regional center too. It's really about how can we be a good partner to you, and part of that is we can be available more quickly. We can help you follow up with a service coordinator who's feeling mechanically very overwhelmed with everything that's happening, right? So that's something that people tend to find very tough. All right, that's fine. Okay, best practices. Let's get to the next one. I want to make sure this is fine before we do it. That how you can get started. Let's just give you some very basic first steps. What I want to make sure is that you all know we have brochures, and I think Tony and maybe handed some around on your tables. Yes. Yeah. If after we're done, if you think yes, maybe I would love to see what SDP is about, or you just think but I can see if you go to our website, you look at the competition with us. You should talk about that. Yeah. But yeah, you could look at a meeting, just to see if it's the right fit for your family, ask one person. And then I usually go over some guys. But yeah, okay.
And these slides will be available for those who are on Zoom also. Your contact information's at the bottom of that.
And yes, that's correct. Yes, we do. Yeah, so we can, Bridget does consult folks all the time to help understand STP a little better, if a good fit, and then if you are looking for some support for the I'm sure that we could provide in that process. And then I'll make sure I talk about pricing. Let me see what our next slide is. Q&A, okay. And then we can jump into Q&A and see if I answered that question from the beginning. But yeah, so just some things to keep in mind about pricing and how this all works with using our services. So there's a couple different things. I talked first about that stage of enrollment. If you're not yet in SDP, going through all the steps, the regional center directly pays somebody that if you want. So that's not like you have to pay for that. It's the same way that you access all the services now. You say, hey, I'm going to go into SDP, NeuroNav's going to help me, and then we work with the regional center on the same way that they program us, right? So all of that is essentially what you're doing right now. After you are entering SDP, or as you're going to do that process, you're going to make a decision on whether or not you want to continue having support in SDP with an independent facilitator. And at that point, the decision is, how much help do I need? Are these things that I want or can or feel compelled to do myself? Some people do. If the answer to those is I need a lot of help and I don't want to do it, or I don't have the capacity to do it, whatever it may be, then you would want to think about when you look at some independent facilitators. The reason you want to think through that is because while the regional center directly pays independent facilitators as they do all vendors during the enrollment process, once you enroll in SDP, you decide if you want to use some of your budget funds to pay for an independent facilitator. So it's not you paying it directly, but you're making a decision with that amount of money you have in your budget. Do I want to dedicate some of that to an independent facilitator to help us work through So it's a little bit of a different consideration and conversation. When it's before SPP, it's again, same as traditional services, it's a set rate. EDS tells us what we get paid. The regional center pays us. That's the end of that conversation, right? In SPP, which I don't think I highlighted very strongly, you're negotiating rates. So there's not a set rate for anything except for FMS. So you're negotiating all the rates. So you might go and look at independent facilitators and they may charge dramatically differently. They may have very different billings, business models, so to speak, of how they do things. Same thing goes for hiring staff or finding providers. You're going to have that conversation with them about how much you want to pay for that service. Once you're in at SCP, if you choose to use an IM, you'll find that there are a lot of independent facilitators that bill hourly. So they may have an hourly rate, whatever they do, like for instance, students, $125 an hour, I would say for what I typically see for IFs. Or there's some independent facilitators that bill you a monthly, kind of like a business fee, we call it a subscription model, right? Where it's the same rate every month, and however much you need is how much you need in that given month, but the price stays the same. And that's how NeuroNav operates. Because if we have a monthly, it's tiered based on how much you want from us. Some people are like, we just want to know you're there, we want you to check in on us. But we pretty much got it. And other people more of a we would like to do right? So we have some different levels, and then we have a monthly rate that stays the same. So it might be $250 a month, or it could be up to like $700 a month, or $800 a month if it's a really high complexity. Where we're helping you manage lots of different invoices and finding new providers, right? So there's a whole range of monthly fees that we have on our end. Just based on what you're looking for, how much support you need. From our experience, what we know the general workload will be for a spending plan that looks such like right? We've been doing this a long time, so we kind of will work with you on what that looks like. But those are the two different ways you'll see IS. Here is hourly or a monthly rate. That I will go to question. Yeah. The FMS always paid straight from the regional center. You would never, you wouldn't have to put that into spending plan or budget. They would continue paying it separately from the student. So whenever you go into SCP, you'll pick the FMS you want to work with, and then the regional center will do their behind the scenes authorization, just like they do for a gig program or a SPIP provider, and you won't get involved at all. But you don't have to budget for it. Yes, we'll see. Yeah.
How would one start? Okay, my son's in regional center just for 3 or 4 years, and I have not been really not that much from them. They discouraged us from doing special day. We over the course of our time there, he's done one social work program. I don't know if he's not that rested out and things like that. So how would we start? He does a lot of things that we just pay for because regional center it doesn't fit, but they or we use our course therapy isn't. So how would one start? Because my budget with regional center is from 0.
Yeah,
So-
person centered plan is critical.
Okay.
That person centered plan, because the budget, so there was an important change in the SPP law recently where it used to say it's based on how much was spent in the last 12 months. It changed. It was better this past summer, where it says it should be based on what the regional center could authorize. Right? So like if you, for instance, your child wants physical therapy or horseback riding, and the regional center never paid for it because we were losing the wrong thing, right? It's not the need for from there, right? And if they had a vendor that worked for you, you would have the center paid for it, right? So in that person-centered planning process, going into the budget meeting is really being clear. Hey, here's my child's need, and something that really fits in with their goals and the quality of life they want to have. And it's horseback riding. We've been paying it privately. Then we go into that budget conversation and say, like, regional center, you guys pay for that, right? Yeah. Okay, well, how much would you spend if they use the regional center budget? Because that's what we want to see budget. So having zero doesn't mean you get zero. It just means you will want to be intentional about the business planning process. All the things are already happening, but they don't know about the increasing. One thing I'll add too is you kind of, if you do decide to hire, so you're able to attend all those meetings. So like we do this plan moving together and then we present it something together. To the reason.
So the first step would be she would contact you and then develop that plan and then make sure happen. So point one, and there's buckets of money. I'm looking forward to that. Somebody.
All the
You just put the money in the bucket you want.
So,
Yeah.
you said that this was federal, state funded, not, well, there even.
That's a great question. One that's been keeping everyone up at night lately. We're fortunate in California, just in general, because we have a very healthy budget compared to other states. The big beautiful bill that everyone's ready to talk about, I think that's the Medicaid cuts that they're making have very little impact directly on the service system in California. Because there's two things that Medicaid does for DBA systems. And one of them has to do with institutional care, which the majority of people are not living in institutional care. I mean, that would be like some smaller group homes are actually considered insufficient, so they will have some impact. But for the most part, like living in the community, that part of the bill is not impacting our services. The other big thing that Medicaid impacts is what's called federal reimbursement. And that dictates that all of the money spent on services, the federal government reimburses 50 cents on the dollar. The bill did not fix that. That stayed completely intact. There's no reduction in that, there's no change in that. So the nuts and bolts of our funding stream from the federal government for our services is mostly untouched. I say that without like jumping and doing cartwheels because there are some pretty significant impacts to other service systems in the state. And when one gets squeezed, eventually something else on the other side is going to be right. So I don't see an immediate impact from Medicaid cuts to our services traditional or S&P. But things continue the way they are now, 3 to 5 years from now, like I can see them in other parts of the state that are like, hey, we're really running out of money here, guys. So that's just to be realistic.
I would just, since we are talking about this, I would just throw this out, just to get your opinion on it. I have heard some talk now that as SDP grows, the money pot will begin to shrink for traditional services over time. And is that a conversation that you're hearing?
No, no, because ultimately it's all the same. It's the same pot of money. And I don't want to bore anyone with like federal policies and whatnot, unless you guys are interested. Got some I know Bridget's like, oh God, no. But essentially these both traditional services and SDP, they're all funded through the same federal program. So whether or not we're getting money for services paid for through SDP or the traditional system, it's all the same thing from the federal standpoint. So that pot of money is the same pot. It could be like let's say there's 100%, maybe 40% is SDP because that's how many people are doing SDP than the other 60% of traditional, right? Like there might be more people using SDP at some point, therefore they're using more of the money because there's more of them. But as far as like does one program take away from another?
So the regional center doesn't.
No, it has no impact on them financially.
Yeah, like, so if you go, I'm doing traditional now, I'm going to do something right.
I may be a little relieved.
Yeah, I mean, that was the idea. Yeah, no, that's, I'm glad you brought that up because, it feels financially, there's no reason for them to take that.
Right.
Logistically, you may get some feelings. So you may get some feelings.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that, in the same way that like all of you listening to this might felt a little overwhelmed by the ideas of this, it feels very overwhelming to regional centers too. But it can be, it's not always.
Is it more work for the,
It shouldn't be, but sometimes it is, and the reason for that is because the program is still changing. And what that means is that there's a lot of misinformation out there.
right,
So you get service coordinators that haven't had a lot of training, right? For regional centers, basically, right? I could never be my service coordinators all trained, right? It's just too much turnover and so much new information. So what I bring this up is to say that if you have a miseducated service coordinator and a miseducated independent facilitator, you're probably going to see fireworks at some point, right? But if you have, you yourself are very well versed in self-determination, you have a well versed independent facilitator, got a good relationship with the regional center, there's no reason to be upset about it. But I do like to be honest, you might get that like, oh God, right? Because they're like, we don't know how to do this very well yet, right? Your service coordinator might say, I just figured out how to do this job. I'm not.
exactly, sort of like, I'm gonna do it. Okay, and I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
I have two questions. What or who determines what is the item that they place behind the subject of the subject?
Yeah, great question. So there is an entire set of, 12 service codes. So traditional, you've got service codes called independent living, respite. SVP has all of their own service codes, and they're very similar. But they're called a little bit different. They're generally speaking a bit broader. So essentially, the question your regional center is going to need to answer and assess, and how you're going to spend money is how you're spending your money. Does it fit one of the federally approved service definitions, which are posted on the BDS, the State Department's website. Newsflash, they're not necessarily easy to interpret always. They were written by the state for the federal government, but they are there. At any rate, they're not, most of them are not that complicated, but sometimes they get overwhelmed with those as well. But essentially, that's the requirement. You want to spend your money on something. Is it part of a federally approved service definition, which we have available to us? And is it in line with the IPP? And then the last thing is there someone else who can pay for it though? They've got traditional fund for us. So if all those three criteria are checked off, then we should let them.
The second question is, I was just told by a regional center case manager that the SEP, like I know now, if you get it, then you get a new self coordinated. But I'm told that they're going to be spreading it out now to all of the. So
Yeah, and that's by regional center, but yes, SDRC, it was spread out, and they consolidated it, and yes, now they are going back to spreading it out. So I think that was maybe.
Yes, that's how they went back to.
They went back,
Yes, and I think we have some questions on Zoom.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Susan.
Does NeuroNav help in the FMS selection process?
Okay, question, does NeuroNav help in the FMS selection process? Yes, we will help with that. We want to make sure that it's your choice, right? So we're not going to say, hey, if you're with, we want you to go with this, or we want you to go with this one, but we will help guide you. There's a lot of FMSs. I think we have 32 in the state right now. So we'll give you some guidance on like, hey, based on what you're looking for, your situation, how much your budget is, because some of them have different caps where they'll only serve certain people. We'll give you some recommendations of like, hey, here's who families have been really happy with, or here's who we have had good customer service from, that kind of thing. But always make sure you know where you can find the full list too.
Go ahead, Tim.
And then is SSI, SSDI, or IHSS effective?
Nope, no impact whatsoever on any other benefits. No, all the same.
I think that was everybody's question.
Yeah.
And so you heard a collective sigh of relief.
Yeah, it does not have any impact on benefits.
And then are the expenses associated with the IF and FMS two separate line items in the budget approved by the SDRC? In addition to the specific services that directly benefit PCP?
Let me see if I understand. So there's the things that happen before enrollment, which is funding to have a person-centered plan done, and then funding to do all of the other things to get into SDP. And that's what people will usually work with an independent facilitator to do. That's all its own thing. The FMS is not yet in the picture at that point in time. During that time, like we help you find one, but the FMS is not part of the picture. Once you go into SDP, then the FMS becomes part of the picture. But to what we were talking about earlier, they're not part of your budget. You don't have to budget for them. The regional center just starts paying them as soon as you enter SDP. You don't have to worry about like budgeting for that. The IF, the regional center bylaw is not allowed to add money to a budget specifically for independent facilitator services. So it's a choice that families make. Do I want to take some of the money in the budget to pay someone to help keep this whole thing moving along? And the reason, just to go into that a bit, the reason why the law doesn't allow increases in the budget specifically for our services, there's a couple things. One, they don't pay for us in the traditional service system. And remember, the budget has to be what they would pay for in the traditional service system. So they can't add money for our services. But also, our service is generally considered like an administrative overhead type of thing, right? We're kind of like the ones keeping things moving. So if you think about your budget's going to be based on, let's say you have respite, your respite agency might get paid $35 an hour. The respite worker makes whatever minimum wage is usually, or close to it, right? So there's like, let's say they make whatever minimum wage is, $23 an hour. I can't keep track. But they make $23 an hour. The agency gets $35 an hour. All of that overhead goes into your budget. So sometimes people like, they hear that and they're like, well, how would we ever pay for an independent facilitator if they don't give us money for it? That's where the decision comes in, is with this kind of administrative overhead that gets built into the budget, do you find value in having somebody help you make this program successful? A lot of people do. A lot of people try it themselves and then say, kidding, I do need help. And then some people, they have an independent facilitator for a little while and then they hit the ground running, right? There's like all different experiences that people have. But that's kind of in a big picture of how it fits in financially.
One last one.
Okay.
Now, how do we make sure there is sufficient funding in the budget to pay for IF and FMS? So
the FMS don't have to worry about. That's all completely separate. Regional center just takes care of it. Being the stand-up people they are, right? Actually, you used to have to budget for it, and it came out of your budget, but they didn't give you money for it, and that changed in 2022. So now they just pay it separately. You don't have to worry about it. The independent facilitator, just to go back to what I was saying, that part you do have to budget for with the funds that you have allocated. Yeah.
And Suzy, don't they renew it or review it every year annually and either change it or increase your spending or adjust what you're putting your money in?
Yep, 100%. Yeah, every year they're going to do that same thing again, tell you here's how much money you're working with for the next 12 months. and you either make a few changes to your spending plan, or maybe it's all exactly the same and just kind of move through it. But you can always ask for a change to your budget. So if they give you a 12-month budget and it's not working, you can always go to them and say, it's not working. By law, they're allowed to adjust the budget if there's been a change in your circumstances, your needs, or your resources. So for instance, somebody graduating from the school system, moving out of the family home into their own place, having a decline in a medical condition, all of those things create a new scenario. And that's when they're going to be able to adjust the budget. And that can also happen every year. I'm sorry, I saw you put your hand up.
Hi, thank you. I have a question. So if my current transition budget is, for example, 10,000, but if I switch to it, specifically, is it the same budget or the increase, or they have a limit?
There's no limit. Essentially it should just be whatever they would have spent in the traditional system. So if it was 100,000 in traditional, it should be 100,000 in SDP. If it goes, I've hardly ever seen a budget stay exactly the same, because usually there's rate increases to services, right? So if a rate goes up, like we just had a massive rate reform in the state. So everybody's budgets went up significantly over the last 3 years because all of the rates for traditional services also went up. Or there may be a new need, something like that. So in theory, though, whatever your budget is should be the same amount of money that your regional center would be authorizing if you were not an SDP. So that might be different from 1 year to the next, but it should be the same regardless of whether you're an FPP or not.
The struggle I have is that if the same, then why I want to switch? Because I have to manage a lot of things. I'm not in the regional center to do
Yeah.
the job, right?
Yeah, and for some people, like the traditional services that are available are working really well. And you don't have anything like if you went into SDP and you were gonna do all of the exact same services you have now, it wouldn't make sense, right? Because you've already got it all set up. SDP makes sense for people that they feel they're not getting served well enough by the services they have access to now, and they want to broaden that. But for some folks, that's not the case, and that's okay.
One more question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The one more question is that, so right now, for example, if my kid get a swimming and also for us, a gym, but if they stop swimming, I don't have to worry about it, they just focus on gym. But for SDP, how do I manage that? If they don't do swimming, can I use the money to do more other things like that? Or they're just wasted?
Yeah, there's some with social, like the social rec, there are some nuances because it depends how they fund it in traditional. So there's kind of like a calculus equation response to that. But what I would definitely with SDRC, if they put money in your budget for swimming, they will expect to see you spend it on swimming, because that's what they would have paid for in the traditional. So if you're going to move that money around, you can still do that. You'll just need to work, like you'll have to have a conversation with them about what that looks like. Yeah.
It sounds like you're saying, I could ask my regional center coordinator how much I have to spend, and they would give me an answer.
Yes, over time.
Like you should get a piece of paper every year that tells you what they spend every year.
Yeah, but is that what they spent based on what I've said each, or is it my?
Yeah, they'll do an individual, like, because there is the annual cost statement, and that gives you a pretty good idea of like how much money your child services have been costing. When it gets to the budget, it'll be individualized. Like they won't just give you your cost statement and say, here's your budget. But that's a really good way to get just like an idea of like, how much do they even spend on respite, right?
But I think for you, Lynn, it's gonna be very important because he doesn't have a day program right now, so you have to
plan, like,
Right.
he needs a day program and living and all that, yeah.
Okay.
Cause if it's not already in there, then
Yes,
that's a
then,
lot.
Yeah,
To add.
But they can add it in because it's an unmet need right now.
Yes, absolutely.
So just,
Yeah.
What I have found with self-determination is sometimes you can hire people like Amy to get really good people to work with your child. And when you go, you have, we're at the liberty of everyday program to, like she said, you send them to program and you just hope that they're gonna have a great day. But if you're in charge of somebody that's doing exactly what you want, that's a big deal, you know?
on your payroll, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, I just think,
Yep.
because Ben spends a lot of time at home, I would think that it might be a really great thing for you.
Hunter?
So, yeah, I run a day program
Uh-huh.
and I take both SDP and
Uh-huh.
traditional, regional center. But when I got that vendor ID, I had to go through the meat grinder to be qualified. Like, I have to have, people that have a college education and I have to have $1 billion of liability insurance. And so what are the standards that any of the other providers have to provide as far as liability insurance or training or anything for a lot of the SDP programs? I don't
Yeah.
know that, so I
Yeah.
just accept SDP and I just
Yeah.
move on. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very different world. Yeah, to be a traditional services vendor, you've really gotta jump through a lot of hoops. Yeah.
I could speak to that to
Okay,
a
yeah.
certain extent, and I know Amy's gonna speak on the opposite side, but as an SDP provider, they basically make you jump through hoops and they set those hoops on fire and then they move them. And as you're going through them, you're realizing that they're changing the playing field. So you have to go.
have liability insurance.
Absolutely, you have to
And
have all of
training.
that, training, liability, you have to be.
Unless you're
in some
staff.
way, yes,
Unless
it
you're
has to be your pathway. You have to be able to not speak vocational, but you have to have some type of vocational pathway. If it's a specific type of SDP program, it has to have a beginning and end. There's requirements for sure.
Yeah, by the way the law and the federal approval for it that we have, like there's some very basic requirements for businesses, like having a California business license, and then some of the service codes have like certifications that you have to have. It'll have it listed, like if you're gonna do respite, they have to have CPR certification, right? So I got some things like that. But there's a lot more flexibility though. I will say, yeah, and if you're hiring someone, they're covered by the FMS.
Yes,
They're covered by the FMS.
and then you have to go through the same scrutiny as through an FMS. And each FMS has their own onboarding, so you have to have the regional center's blessing, you have to have an FMS blessing, you have to have the onboarding. And you have to have all of those in place, and it helps if you're a regional center vendor, because then you can.
Maybe that's what I said.
And that's for they're giving you that hard of a time doing the culinary stuff?
Oh, culinary, yeah,
Yeah.
I pulled out teeth
Oh.
to sell it, so I
Yeah.
can have consultants, so I can get the gold. Yeah,
My
So
goodness.
typically, like with most services, it's fairly streamlined.
yeah, it's
but-
because it fits into a nice neat
Yeah.
box, but that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
And I think Amy is a good testimony for someone who has used SDP for your child. So, Amy, you got.
a segue?
Yeah.
Bridget.
No, Bridget's, she's.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Suzy talking.
Oh, yeah, do I have to stand up? Or can I just?
Yeah, I can sit down and give you a
Yeah,
date.
okay, please.
No, you're important to me. Oh.
And then we'll applaud at the end. Yeah.
That's all right.
I'm sorry, but- Oh, we have one more question for NeuroNav.
Oh,
Stay
yeah.
right there. You're good.
Okay.
Please. Go ahead, David.
Okay. So, question from David says, many times I've heard that it is quite a bit of work to administer SD. Please describe how and why parents feel this way. If the parent were to continue the same services, but add other services specifically, what is the work?
The work that parents experience in SDP is, managing payments and invoices to providers, making sure their staff are filling out their timesheets the way that they're supposed to. You can probably speak to this much better than I, being a parent. Okay, I will turn it to her and she can just segue that right through.
Yeah. So my daughter Michelle is 37 and she's in year 4 of self-determination. And basically we were one of the ones that got into it because of having not a lot of luck with the vendors. She was not in, I couldn't get her in a day, had trouble getting her in a day program. So, and had tried Taylor Day and they couldn't find staff for her. So I mean, I think the regional center spent like $6,000 on her, which isn't very much in a year. And so it was sort of desperation and nothing to lose really. And so, and I guess the main draw was that I knew I would be able to pay staff more than what the vendors were trying to hire staff for, and not succeeding to find staff for her. She has, you know, she's more work than some, let's put it that way. And I guess our location was also not where the workforce was. So anyway, we got into it. We used an IF the first year, and it was definitely a hard learning curve. It is hard to understand. I got very confused a few times. It was, at the time, it was hard to get an FMS. I think it's better now, and we're doing fine with the one we have now. But so, and then the other big hurdle for us was hiring staff. It wasn't too hard to find the vendors, but hiring staff, a lot of the IFs don't do that for you. I think these guys can do some of it, but it would come out of your budget. And so I tried different things and ended up, I advertised on Indeed. Now, Michelle doesn't have a lot of staff. She has 2 workers and they provide 4 or 5 days a week for like 6 or 7 hours, and I can pay them better than the vendors who were not able to find staff. So they stay for a while, and then when they do move on, it's work to hire new people. So that would be one thing. And so in addition to the aids, we do get some behavioral consultation there from a BCBA and help with her AAC device, horseback riding, a membership in a special needs gym, and the IF. And so, you know, it's like Suzy said, it is coasting sometimes, but then there's still work. But it's much easier than when we started. There were tears. Sometimes.
Would you recommend it, Amy?
It depends on who it is. You know, if they're kind of happy with the way things are going,
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
that's the way I am. But we were really unhappy.
Yeah.
So
About how much time do you think you put in per week, just an average week on the SDT?
it varies so much.
Okay.
I don't think I've put in time this week.
Okay.
But you know, if we're coming to renewal or if I have to do a spending plan change. And I do use an IF now. It was year 2, I decided to not use one. And then year 3, I decided I don't really like doing spreadsheets and I had made a couple of goofs that were a headache. So now we use one again. So if we didn't, it would be more of my time. So, you know, budget kind of rolls around and I've got definitely some time to put in it, even more if I have to hire a staff, because since you know, it takes a lot of winnowing out of applications and stuff. It's been a while. I didn't give you exactly an answer because it varies so much.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's true of anything. Once you get it up and running and you have somewhat of a status quo and it's going well, you don't put as much time. And then when you need to do budgets or need to do some hiring, there's more of a curve to be able to put more work into it. So, and Amy's lived to
Yeah.
tell about it. So that's a good.
That's
thing.
right.
And you know what? It was not, it was not too long ago that we didn't have individuals like Suzy and Bridget that could navigate the process. And that's what I love about the name NeuroNav, is that you help us navigate and say, this is where you need to go. And then we step back, or this is where you need to go. And we're here to support, because that's what we're all about. It's really looking for solutions and talking amongst ourselves. This is, it worked for me, but maybe not for this mom. And, you know, and I can speak to the other side. And so I think having this collective conversation is really important. And do we have another question, David, or is that just a long soliloquy that I missed from before?
It's like, it seems like it's like off of what you're talking about. It's a list of like the
Parent duty,
Parent duties,
I
yeah.
do have a question, Susie. If
Yeah.
you get hired, like if we were to hire you, who pays the workers' comp and everything? Because I'm a vendor and that's a very expensive workers' comp and.
Yeah, the FMS.
The
Well,
FMS.
sorry, actually, let me back that up. Who actually pays, like if you're hiring your own staff,
Yeah.
it would get built into the hourly wage of your staff.
Oh, so you don't have to like go out and buy a policy or.
No, but you do use the budget
But
fund.
it's
so-
in your bucket of
Right.
budget.
Right, okay, yeah.
There's,
Okay.
and like every FMS,
That is.
every FMS has their like percent of their employer burden posted on the DDS website. So most of them, depending, because there's a couple, I won't go into all the details on that, but it might be anywhere from 14 to 25% of the hourly wage. Is what's called the employer burden, so it pays like the federal, state taxes, workers' comp insurance, all those things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wait, but again, that's gonna vary based on your business model. So if you're just an independent contractor, whatever it is, right, you're not gonna have workers' comp associated with it unless they're an employee of the FMS.
Oh, right.
Yeah, if you're an independent contractor, your hourly rate, we're assuming.
You just
they're
turn that
coming
down.
up that
Right,
figure
you
out
just
yourself.
run it through your own.
You're on your own.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And before, we're running up to 8 o'clock. Is there any additional questions? Don't go away anymore.
We have
Yeah.
some more time if we need.
Yes, okay, so is there any other questions for Suzy and for Bridget? You have a question? Yes, ma'am.
If they, the house, find a one person for the increaser, right? But how do you find the person who how that person, how do you know that support person is qualified or like a trend or?
Yeah, so that's a good question of like, what do you do when, how do you know if somebody you're hiring is qualified? You have a lot of control over that, right? So a lot of that is you making that determination. There is, one pretty important safeguard that anybody who's gonna be hired as a staff to provide personal care to somebody has to go through a very specific background check just for SDP. So for most providers, you go through, like, they do the live scan, and that background check happens. With SDP, there's an extra step where you do the live scan, it might have the FBI depending on their residential history. But then it goes through DDS and has to get approved specifically by DDS, and that person's on record directly with the department. And so there's just that extra layer of oversight for personal care staff and SDP. But beyond that, like, as the parent, you're taking ownership of that, right? Of like, I'm going to determine if this person, but there is that one legal thing but they have to get a very specific background check.
And I know that that's very difficult because I had one staff person that became a vendor and it took a long time. And they got real personal.
And they go back a long time,
Yeah.
different cities,
Oh, yeah.
different states, yeah.
Yeah,
As they
Not a
should.
police
As
officer.
they should.
I had that team when I was overseeing that team when I was at the state. Yeah, we go way back.
Yeah.
You really get in there. Yeah, it's a very extensive.
And certain
background check.
cities take longer to get your information, you know, if you're ran a house of elder repute or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to just say thank you, again, for Suzy and Bridget. For those who are on Zoom, thank you for your patience and great questions. This is gonna be available to us, for the, for download. It's also being taped, so we'll be able to have that for everybody. And so I certainly want to thank you again.
Do you want me to mention-
Yes, I want to make sure you stand right here because we have our next month's speaker lineup. We want to make sure we speak to that, and Amy is controlling the horizontal and vertical for that. Go ahead, Amy.
So it's gonna be Wendy Smith. She teaches a life planning workshop with Home of Guiding Hands.
Yes, it's going to be a great program here in our new home. Again, thank you to Tony Rubino. Thank you for our unified esports. Thank you so much for New Generation for our snacks. I don't know if you had the, I don't know if they were mozzarella balls or whatever those things packed with some good. Mine had like confetti of macaroni and cheese just popped out. But I also want to say thank you to our committee, because we are a committee of volunteers. So if you could just stand up and let us know who's helped through this, and you can stand up because you helped, you got here early and don't ever do that again. So Julie, our co-chair, Amy, Tony, please, you are humble, unless you can't stand because you've been working all day.
Yeah. Very comfortable. Right
And
now.
then, of course, yes, and please stand up, Suzy. You're absolutely wonderful. Thank you. And it's just a wonderful group. You don't do this alone, for sure. And if I've learned anything through this program is that people do this out of the love of their heart. So thank you so much. And also too, just a reminder, our next meeting is going to be May 21st at the Porterhouse next door, closer to the bathrooms for those who are bladder issues. So we also want to make sure that you know that we're dark in June and July, but there are other things that we have going on, right? And I want to just make sure that you know that there's so many different programs in our area. Therapeutic Rec City of San Diego, we have those wonderful things. The City of Poway Recreation has 2 different classes. Music on Tuesday, self-care on Thursday. Special Olympics is wonderful. We have a social hub of diverse adults. You know, I've realized that everybody has more of a social life than I do. You know, it's like Friendship Circle has all different types of activities. And of course, you can ask your regional center, coordinator about different programs. But I would implore you, if you have any additional questions for Suzy and Bridget, reach out. There's pamphlets here. Take 1, take 2, because you're going to need to pass it around, because after you talk to people, they're going to want to know about this. And they're very, very responsive. And they also have Zoom activities going on constantly to be able to update us, because it is a new area, I think, newer. It's been around for a while. They've been around since before 2020, correct? You know, through COVID and things. But the resources are there for our families, and that's what we want to be able to take advantage of. And there are buckets of money to be able to do that. And, you know, we love to be able to have our family members and our children active, but it's all about making sure that they're part of what they want to do. And that's what self-determination really defines, is what do they want to do, not what we want them to do because we decide that that's what they want to do. And it's, believe me, sometimes you ask them and you think they want to do culinary and they want to be bowlers, you know, much to my chagrin. So wonderful. Thank you so much. There's still some munchies. There's some things.
And there's a resource fair this Sunday.
Oh, yes.
At the
Thank
end of
you.
the John Crumb
Salvation Army
Right.
on University.
Yeah.
I will be there posting the Mandalorian diplomas.
Oh, wow, wonderful, wonderful.
So please feel free there. You guys, are you staying overnight? If you were able to share.
Oh, you're so good. Yeah. Oh my God.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah, good.